Progressives, this is your trigger warning. Hi, folks, from the Post Millennial. Breaking: Donald Trump calls on the Supreme Court to step in before July 11th sentencing. Judge Merchan, whoever saw the case, is set to sentence President Trump on July 11th, just days before the RNC convention. Now, they say that's a coincidence. I don't buy it for a second. Anybody with two brain cells touching doesn't buy that's a coincidence as well. And for all you Democrats out there that hate Donald Trump, you know it's not a coincidence either. But you're going to go along with it because your hatred for Donald Trump. And I'll say it again. If your hatred for Donald Trump is stronger than your love of the country, then maybe you're part of the problem, more than maybe. Let's read on. This is a post from former President Trump on his True Social. The sentencing for not having done anything wrong will be conveniently before the, I can't use that word here, 4 days before the presidential Republican National Convention. A radical left Sarles-backed DA who ran on a platform, I will get Trump and you get the rest of it. The future of our country might depend on this, and that's really important. For those of you that say, well, John, Supreme Court has no jurisdiction in this because it's a state case. Well, yes and no. They can intervene in non-federal charges, but supposedly the reason why these were all felonies and not a misdemeanor whose statute of limitations has long expired is because he covered up something else, and that's a felony. Okay. What was those felonies? What were they? When you go to court, they say it right in the documentation. You are guilty of, we'll say, assaulting a police officer. Section, 14-6, 108.2, whatever it is. They name the law that's broken. In this case, they named none. But they said the cover-up was a federal violation, election fraud, even though the Federal Election Commission said there was nothing there. Okay, so you get to be charged in the sentencing for federal crime. Don't know which one, but we're sentencing them anyway. None of it makes any sense. So I think the Supreme Court is more than justified by statute and legally, and even more importantly, morally, to step in. I'm not asking for them to dismiss the guilty verdict. Not at all. What I'm asking for is the Supreme Court to step in and say, listen, there are so many inconsistencies and things that are wrong about this entire trial. There's 50 times more than they need for an appeal. To get an appeal, they're going to have to go through the New York Appellate Division, which are going to turn them down. So it's going to take a couple of years before they get through all the courts, before they get to the Federal Circuit Court and the Supreme Court in the end. Just put a stay on it. Just put, he will be released with reasonable bail, reasonable deposit, whatever you want to call it. We'll say $1 million. And until the appeals are heard, the man is free to do what normally would be if he wasn't convicted. I think that's fair. Not to throw out the conviction, just to let him campaign and live his life while they go through the process. It's done all the time. Done all the time, especially with someone with zero marks on his record legally at the state or federal level. Let's read on. The sentencing for not having done anything wrong will be conveniently for the extremists, I'll call them, 4 days before the Republican National Convention. The DA who ran out will get Trump. This is Trump's remarks on his True Social campaign. Before Trump's comments, there had been vocal concern among the MAGA movement that Republicans would try to prevent Donald Trump from becoming the GOP nominee at the RNC convention, replacing him with a different candidate due to the possibility of prison time. If they do that, the Democrats right now are on the edge of a cliff. They put everything in incarcerating Donald Trump. I don't think it's going to happen. Will they give him house arrest? It's the same because he can't campaign. That's why the Supreme Court should step in before. And he'll be bound, he being the judge in New York, he'll be bound by the Supreme Court's decision. And I don't want to hear about, well, three 3 of the justices were appointed by Trump, so of course they'll vote his way. Nonsense. A couple have voted a non-conservative way the other day, and the other day they had several 9-0 votes on things that came before them. So I don't want to hear about the unfairness of the 3 appointees he had. Believe me, they are much more unbiased than the so-called Democrats on the Supreme Court. I'm not saying they're totally biased. I like to think there's some that see things even-handed, but I don't want to criticize the court because I criticize them for criticizing people like Justice Thomas and Justice Alito, so I can't be a hypocrite. It's, if the GOP changes their nominee, if they do it, it'll be the end of the Republican Party, even more importantly, the end of any type of justice in this country. This is the progressives' way of taking over the judiciary, the legislature, and the country. They can't do it in standing armies. They can't do it in economics, even though they're trying really hard to destroy the place economically. Lawfare is the only way they can take over, non-violently. And it's the only way they ever could with a country this size and a country this powerful. If the Republicans change candidates, guaranteed 2 things will happen. 1, Joe Biden will win. And 2 is the Republican Party will be shattered for at least a generation. The Democrats are on the edge of the cliff. They're within a hair's breadth of self-destructing. Now is not the time to air dirty laundry in your own party. Now is the time to circle the wagons and stick together. So one thing Democrats do beautifully, I might add, they stick together no matter what. It makes them poor legislators, but it makes for great politics. And you can't legislate unless you're elected. Democrats are very good at that. We should take that page out of their playbook. Do not even consider or put up for a vote at the convention. Now, if Donald Trump has to stay in his home, I assume he used the one in Florida, Mar-a-Lago, and address the convention that way through the internet, yeah, it'll work, but the Democrats are in a box. If they were smart, they would make known ahead of time, if the Supreme Court steps in. We will allow former President Donald Trump to post a bond. We'll say $1 million. I know that's not a lot for him, but it is a lot of money. Post $1 million bond and let him go about his life and his business, either campaigning or personal or business or whatever it is, until it goes through the appeals process. They let people go for violent assaults all the time in major cities with no bail. And it takes 1 or 2 years to get to their case, and then the judge will drop it to a misdemeanor if you plead guilty. It's not a felony anymore. So you plead guilty, you pay a $500 fine, you do 20 hours of community service. They do it all the time by the tens of thousands. But they want this guy gone. And I can't say how many ways, but more ways than one, and I'll leave it at that. If the judge was smart, instead of having his hatred for Donald Trump, my personal opinion, the judge was just going to retire after this, and he'll get a few $1 million for writing his book, and he'll be set for life. His daughter made millions and millions off the Democrats during this trial. She runs a media company that puts up ads on the internet to help Democrats raise money and ads, for against their political opponents. And that's legit. That's fair. I have no problem with that. But it's a conflict of interest, and there's so many other things. The judge needs at least save face with even the Democrats, because they know this whole thing's a kangaroo court. They know it is. But they don't care because it's Donald Trump. But as soon as this judge says, put up $1 million bond, and I'll let you walk around like a free man until these things go through the process of the appeals court. And all the Democrats will say, see, he's not crazy after all. He's not after Trump. Look how generous he is. They got what they wanted. Now people can say on the media, convicted felon Donald Trump. Borrowing a picture from him with a jumpsuit on, that's the best they're going to get. And they're going to pound that in the ground, which I find amazing because most of the progressives don't like the word felon. I believe there's several states that actually made into law that during a course of court hearings and trials, say convicted felon is against their law now in court and in documents for the state and local DAs. I think they have to put justice involved people. You can't even use the word felon anymore, but they're going to use it all over the place. The hypocrisy of them is just unbelievable. But I digress. The judge can make himself look like a hero. And there's going to be some Republicans that are iffy on Trump or in between saying justice was served here. They're going to go, okay, maybe this judge wasn't as bad as we thought. But will they go full burn down the building? I don't know. That's why I think you can't count on people like Judge Merchan, to do the right thing. Because what they've caused so far is just chaos, and they're destroying the foundations of law in this country. They'll write books about this for the next 50 years, just like Watergate. When I was around during Watergate, I was in high school. I remember Nixon resigning, and it involved all the intelligence services. The Department of Justice, the CIA, the FBI were all involved with what they called rat effing and trying to change or put down and fool with the Democrats' campaign for president. They even went after people they thought were going to be good candidates for them and destroyed them to allow McGovern to become their candidate. And of course, Nixon just slaughtered him. But all the government agencies were involved, and the whole house of cards came tumbling down. He resigned, Richard Nixon, first president ever to resign. And then we got Jimmy Carter. I understand Carter's on his last legs. I wish him well, even though in my lifetime, he's not the worst president anymore, but he's close. Biden so far is the worst president of my lifetime. But I digress again. We can't have this happen. This is a huge miscarriage of justice. If this case was acted on, say it was a young black man on trial for assaulting a police officer or whatever charge, it would be screaming that defense witnesses were barred from testifying, or the rules given to the witnesses were so ridiculous there's no point for the person to testify. They would be screaming injustice. But if it's Donald Trump, the end justifies the means. Any means necessary. And if the law doesn't protect people like Donald Trump, then it protects no one. Make no mistake. So yes, I think the Supreme Court should not overthrow the conviction, at least temporarily for now, but instruct the court that they have to let him go with, say, $1 million bond. I think that's more than reasonable, and I think even many of the anti-district attorney brag people that think this whole thing is a circus, and it is, and it's all orchestrated, even some of them will back off a little bit. We'll have to see. But you can't count on them to do that. That's why I think the Supreme Court should step in. This is what the founding fathers were thinking of when they made the Supreme Court judicial branch a separate branch of government. Unfortunately, right now, the media, corporations, the U.S. House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, and the presidency are all together. That's the fear the founders had, that there were separate checks and balances. Well, I think it's time that the U.S. Supreme Court did some checking and some balancing. What do you think? Until the next time, God bless, goodbye, and good luck.